Today's episode is a personal and a practical one because I'm walking you through a decision I recently made in my business, which is changing the name of this podcast and, more importantly, the bigger lesson behind it. So, how do you know when to stick it out and when it's time to make a change in your business? Whether it's your niche, your offer, your messaging, your branding, or your podcast title, knowing when to pivot versus when to hold steady is one of the most important skills you'll develop as a coach and entrepreneur. Because business is a compound game, but at the same time, ignoring the nudge to evolve can also hold you back just as much as changing too often. So today, I want to take you behind the scenes of my decision to rename this podcast from Rising Coaches with Sophia Bernardi to Behind the Business. And I want to share how I thought through this pivot and how you can apply this same discernment into your own business so you grow with clarity and momentum, not confusion or chaos. So let's start here. One of the biggest things I see is coaches chronically changing things. It stalls their progress so much, changing their niche every 3 weeks, starting a new Instagram account every few months, deleting all their posts and redoing all their branding, rebuilding their offer before you've even sold your current one. It often comes from a really well-intentioned place of wanting it to be perfect and to get it to right and to get it to work and wanting to feel more aligned or chasing that next level version of your brand. But the truth is, clarity and results come from commitment. You have to put in the reps. You have to let your work compound. Because restarting over and over keeps you in the early stages of business, no matter how long you've technically been in it. And when your audience sees you reinventing the wheel every few weeks, it creates uncertainty for them. And remember, a confused mind never buys. And if you're not clear and grounded, they're not going to be either. So let's be real. This doesn't mean that you should never change anything. Business is a constant evolution. Tweaking is a part of the process. You're meant to refine your messaging, improve your delivery, upgrade your systems. I'm still doing that most weeks in my business, and I'm nearly 6 years in. The work is never done, but there is a huge difference between strategic tweaks and constant resets. The difference is intention, and it matters. Here's what I believe when I believe a pivot is actually the right move. So, number one is when you have real data, not just a dip in motivation. So if you've done the reps consistently for at least 90 days with something, whether that's your niche, your messaging, your offer, whatever it might be, and you've consistently leaned into that, right? You've not just had it there and let the offer collect dust without making offers, or let the niche be there without actually, putting it out there consistently and having meaningful conversations, right? And the data is showing you that it's not converting or resonating, then it absolutely might be time to reevaluate. But you can't pivot off a hunch. You actually need evidence. Otherwise, what I see happen with so many coaches is they fall in this constant hamster wheel cycle of changing based on emotion and reactivity, rather than based on data and facts, okay? Another way you know when it's time to pivot or make a change is when you're guided by someone who's been where you want to go. So having a coach in your corner who knows you and your business and your goals very deeply, not just some random video on the internet of someone saying that, because remember, there's 101 ways you can do something, and it's important to know the pros and cons of all of those things, because just because someone at 8 figures does that doesn't mean someone starting out should, and so forth. So actually having your coach in your corner is really important, because if they suggest something based on everything they know about you and your business and your goals and the skill set they have and the fact that they've gotten the result that you're after, then it's not a guess, it's based on data, their data, right? And then you can move forwards with clarity and not confusion, because you're supported by someone who's already done that testing and knows what actually works and what's best for you. It's a true pivot, not just a panic rebrand. If your offer, message, or positioning is 80% there and just needs refinement, that's fine, refine it. You don't need to burn it all down to grow. Clarity compounds when you give it time to work. You've sat with the idea and not just reacted to a bad week, okay? So for example, I had the idea to change this podcast name actually 6 months ago. I'm not saying you need to wait that long to make a decision, but I did take my time because one, it wasn't a bottleneck in my business. So often people are changing things in their business that aren't actually even a problem yet. For example, they're changing their offer and their signature method all of the time, but they don't even have leads yet. So no one's even seeing their offer, right? The offer is not necessarily the problem. It's actually probably that you just don't have leads and eyeballs actually seeing your offer, or you're not making offers, So I didn't change the podcast name because it wasn't actually a problem externally in my business. It was more just a thought in my mind of a desire to change it, right? Changing the name of my podcast isn't going to explode my income overnight. And it's something people see and hear weekly. Like, people are subscribed to this podcast or my YouTube channel. And if you're not and you're listening, please go ahead and do that. It helps me out so much. But people are listening to this every week, and then therefore it's really important that I take my time to make sure I'm making the right decision, because people will probably lose trust if every week or every month I'm changing the name of this podcast. They won't even know who they're subscribed to anymore. So it's really important that I felt deeply aligned with where I'm going, and it wasn't just some sort of fleeting desire that I had that would just confuse my audience. And this is the same way I think about things like tweaking an I help statement or changing your branding colors. Those changes might feel like progress, and like I said, sometimes it's necessary, but often, right, it's not going to move the needle unless you're solving the root cause problem, fixing something that's truly out of alignment based on new clarity and strategy. I've seen coaches change their I help statement 15 times, saying the same thing just in a slightly different order, because they're chasing the dopamine hit of feeling like they're working on their business. But what they're actually doing is avoiding the uncomfortable work, like posting high quality content, deepening their skill set, which takes time, effort, and energy, getting better at sales, which they've been avoiding, having real conversations with ideal clients, making consistent offers. So yes, tweak when you know better, but not just when you feel bored, and not just for that dopamine hit if you haven't actually done all of those things that I just mentioned, which are actually the things that matter. I've got hundreds of clients, and I would bet you that 90% of them have no idea what my I help statement is, because it doesn't actually matter. What matters is that I built a relationship with them, and I showed them through my content, my messaging, my lives, my events, my podcast, my YouTube channel, that I can help them. And that is what matters, not how flashy my I help statement is, as an example, right? So yes, tweak when you know better, not just when you feel bored, because a well-timed pivot can change everything, but constantly changing things without that strategy and intentionality, without direction, data, or support, will only slow you down. Quick interruption, because I see so many coaches stuck in the same frustrating plateau. Let me guess, you're making sales, but it's inconsistent. You're juggling clients, content, and marketing, feeling overwhelmed doing all of the work yourself. You know you're meant for bigger cash months, more freedom and impact, but scaling currently feels like a faraway dream. That's exactly why I created Scale School, the 12-month mastermind for established female coaches ready to hit 30K months the simple, sustainable way. If that sounds like you, DM me the word SCALE on Instagram at Sophia Rose Bernardi, and I will send you all of the details. Now, back to the episode. The point is, don't confuse boredom or uncertainty with misalignment. Often the breakthrough is on the other side of staying consistent just a little longer and actually committing to mastery rather than dabbling. So now let's talk about the name change of my podcast from Rising Coaches with Sophia Bernardi to Behind the Business. For the last 3 years, this podcast has been called Rising Coaches with Sophia Bernardi. I actually remembered just the other day that this podcast was originally called Lost to Limitless. I didn't have the title like that for very long. I think I have no idea. I'm just going to guess and say 10 episodes. And then after that, I did change it. That was, many years ago now. But for the majority of this podcast, it's been called Rising Coaches with Sophia Bernardi. It was created for the season I was in, helping new coaches rise into their first offers, their first 5K months, and their first version of their business success. And that season served so many of you, and it's still something that I teach and talk about because I absolutely support new coaches. But I've grown, my clients have grown, my brand and body of work has evolved significantly in the last 3 years, and I don't only help new people, and the word rising no longer resonates as much as it did 3 years ago. Now I talk about some slightly higher level things and some slightly deeper things than just rising. I talk about scaling and things like that. And so I felt this pull for something deeper, and it's not to dismiss or say I dislike the word rising or anything to do with that. Of course not. I just feel like I've evolved as a human, and therefore the podcast should reflect that after all of this time. Something that reflects the real conversations I'm having daily with high-level clients, mentors, and friends. Something that honors not just the surface wins, but the behind-the-scenes work that it actually takes to scale. So, Behind the Business was born. This name has a double meaning. It's about going behind the scenes of a successful coaching business, whether that be mine or someone else's, sharing the strategy, the systems, the structures, and what it really took to get there. But it's also about behind the human running the business, the mindset, the identity, the hard stuff that no one usually talks about, and the inner work that's required that, again, usually makes all of the difference and isn't spoken about enough. It's the kind of content I'm personally obsessed with. I'm so nosy. I love seeing behind the scenes of someone's life, their personal life, their business. I love hearing the real stuff, the messy stuff, the ugly stuff, the stuff that you just don't see that often. And I think especially now with tools such as AI in the works, this kind of content is going to become more and more essential and necessary and desired than ever before. And so I wanted the title of the podcast to actually reflect that. So if you're here for the strategy, the mindset, the honest lessons, and the real behind the scenes business conversations, you are in the right place. But you can also expect more transparency, more truth telling, and deeper insight to what it really looks like to grow a wildly profitable and sustainable coaching business. Because whilst my business is incredible 99.9% of the time, and I love my life and I love what I do and I love the life that I've created, that does not come without its challenges, its hard moments, its anxiety, its stress, and its learning curves. And I want to share all of that stuff so that when you go through that, you're not so shocked like I was, because it's been normalized to you already, and you'll actually have the strategies and the insights and the wisdom to prevent certain things, but also to solve certain things when these things happen as you scale your business. You'll hear from me and other successful entrepreneurs so that you can see the full picture, not just the polished wins. This podcast is here to help you make decisions with strategy, not stress, to tweak with purpose and not panic, and build a business that compounds, not constantly resets. So if you've ever found yourself wondering, should I stick with this or is it time to pivot? This is your episode to come back to in those moments, to get that reminder that you need in case you've slipped into that phase of just seeking that dopamine hit and trying to be comfortable rather than doing the actual hard, uncomfortable work that's required to get the result that you say that you want. And if you don't yet have support to do that, this is your reminder to do so. I don't know of a coach that is successful without support. Mentorship is required, and it's going to save you so much time. Of course, you can learn 101 things for free, and you can get pretty far for free listening to podcasts like this, YouTube channels, free resources, free events, but you have to do all the hard work to stick it together, search the answers constantly and try and piece it together and assume a lot of things, and that is very expensive. So whilst it's quote unquote free, you don't realize how much it's actually costing you in terms of time and effort and energy, and that stuff really matters. So all businesses require investment, and you can choose which way you go about that. But if you don't have a coach, you don't have a high level mentor, this is your friendly reminder to invest in that, so that you also have the support to know if and when to pivot, but also how to pivot and what to pivot with. This is why I give my clients all the scripts, the tools, the templates for everything that I do where required, so that they don't have to guess and constantly be pivoting. They just go straight to what works. That's why I love creating systems and things like that for the back end of my business to save my clients hours and hours and hours and so much stress and energy. All right? So if you want help navigating those decisions with more clarity and less guesswork, and less hard work, that's exactly what I do with my clients, and I would love to support you. You can just book a roadmap call with us below in the show notes, and then we can have a chat with you and see if we can help you and if that aligns for you. All right. So Just to wrap up, whether you've been here since Lost to Limitless or whether you've been here since the beginning of Rising Coaches or now this is your first time listening, thank you so much for being a part of this space. It means so much to me. And if this episode gave you the clarity or confidence that you needed, please send it to a coach friend of yours who might need to hear this as well. Here's to doing the work behind the business. I'll see you next week. If you loved this episode, take a sec to screenshot it, share your thoughts on Instagram stories, and tag me at Sophia Rose Bernardi. Then send me the word gift and I will send you an exclusive client workshop of mine that supported my clients to make tens of thousands of dollars from that one training alone. And I'll do that as a thank you for taking the time to spread this podcast with me far and wide. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.